So let me ask you a question. If someone asks you, how does the brain work? Where do you even begin to answer? Well, it turns out the level at which you answer is just as important as the answer itself. Today we're going to dive into the different layers of understanding the brain, from the tiniest molecules all the way up to our behavior.
You know, it's one of those questions that seems so simple on the surface. We've all wondered about it. And when we ask, we're usually kind of hoping for a single, neat, tidy answer.
Yeah, we're all looking for that one single aha moment, right? That one theory that just makes everything click into place. But let's be real, with a system as unbelievably complex as the brain, is that even possible? The truth is, the brain doesn't just give up its secrets from one angle. Nope, it's a system that demands we look at it from multiple perspectives, at all these different scales. And to really get a handle on this, we need a good way to visualize it.
Okay, so let's try this. Imagine the brain is this huge, bustling city. Now, you could describe that city by the chemical makeup of its bricks and steel, or you could describe it by its street map, or its traffic patterns, or even its economic output. You see, none of those descriptions would be wrong. They'd just be different levels of explanation. So we're going to use this city as our guide.
So here we are. One question, but so many answers. The real key here isn't just about the brain itself, but about how we choose to look at it. There isn't one single right answer. Instead, it's a whole series of complementary views that all fit together.
And that's the secret sauce right there. It's all about knowing which tool to pull out of the toolbox for the right job, you know? The trick is figuring out which explanation works best for which question. So, let's start at the ground level.
All right, we're on to the brain's molecular machinery. Level 1, the chemical foundation. So let's start at the very bottom, the most fundamental level. In our city metaphor, this is like analyzing the chemical composition of the concrete, the bricks, and the steel. This is the nitty-gritty of the brain's molecular machinery.
At this scale, it is all about the raw materials. You've got ions, which are basically tiny little electrical charges, and proteins and neurotransmitters. Their constant dance is what determines a neuron's most basic properties, like how easily it fires up or how it uses energy. This is the world where pharmacology lives. A drug works by directly changing this fundamental brain chemistry. But, okay, here's where we hit a wall. No matter how closely we track every single molecule zipping around, that chemical view doesn't really explain how you remember your favorite song or learn a new skill. For that, we've got to change our perspective.
So, moving on up, from synapses to circuits, this is level 2, the connected network. So we've got to zoom out. If the last level was our city's raw materials, this level is its sprawling street map and the dynamic flow of traffic. Here, we're looking at how all those individual parts connect and talk to each other.
And wow, this is where things get really dynamic. Neurons chat with each other across these little connections called synapses. And these connections are not static at all. They physically change based on what you do and experience. This is, and I mean literally, how learning gets etched right into the physical structure of your brain. And when you get groups of these neurons working together, they form circuits that handle specific tasks, creating all the patterns and rhythms that make your brain work.
And this reveals a massive leap in understanding, right? A memory isn't just stored in one neuron, like a file in a single folder. No way. Instead, it exists as a pattern of activity spread across a whole population of them. The meaning emerges from the collective, not from the individual.
All right, so we've got the street map, and we can see the traffic zipping around. But that doesn't tell us why the traffic is flowing that way. What's the economic activity driving it all? What do these patterns actually mean?
To get at that why, we have to zoom out one more time. Welcome to the cognitive perspective. Level 3, the search for meaning. In our city, this isn't about the streets or the steel anymore. It's the economy, the culture, the unwritten rules that govern life. It's about the function behind all the activity.
Now, what's fascinating here is that to understand this level, we kind of have to ignore the tiny biological details. We use abstract models of information processing to explain big things like how we make decisions. Think about it. You don't need to understand transistor physics to explain how a piece of software works. And in the same way, you don't need to track individual ions to understand why a person chooses one thing over another. This level of abstraction is absolutely crucial for everything from psychology to building AI.
Okay, And that brings us to the final level, the one where all this hidden, internal stuff finally bursts out into the open. It's where the brain meets the world, the convergence point, behavior. This is our city, our brain, finally interacting with the world around it. Every action you take, every choice you make, that's behavior. And it isn't separate from biology. It's the ultimate expression of the molecular, the network, and the cognitive levels, all firing in perfect concert.
So, after all that, what's the big picture? The neuroscience mindset is all about building bridges, not picking sides. The goal isn't to argue about which level is the true one. The real skill is learning how to move between them, to build bridges and see how they're all deeply connected.
So let's just break it down one last time. Each level is like a different tool for a different kind of question. If you want to know how a specific drug affects the brain, you got to look at the molecular machinery. If you're curious about how experience physically changes us, that's a question for the circuit level. See? These views aren't fighting each other. They're all pieces of the same giant, incredible puzzle.
And that, right there, is really the core idea of this whole explainer. This shift in perspective is what modern neuroscience is all about. It's less about fighting over who has the right model and way more about integrating all these different viewpoints to build a richer, more complete picture of how we work. So, I'm going to turn this back to you. Now that you're thinking about these different levels, what kind of question about the brain are you most curious about? And maybe more importantly, which level of explanation do you think would be the best place to start looking for an answer?